And PNP Network welcomes a legend in comedy with us today. Tom Dreesen is here. He's the author of a book called Tim and Tom, an American comedy in black and white, and it's a great book. I read through the entire book. It's from Chicago Press, and I got to tell you, I really enjoyed the book. I feel for you and Tim. You both had some very interesting childhoods. Not the most pleasant, but life turned out to be okay for both of you.
Yeah, well, this book is I think it's a positive book. It's a book about struggle, a black guy growing up in the South and a white guy growing up in the South Side of Chicago. The black guy was schlepped from home to home and foster home, and the white kids growing up with 8 brothers and sisters living in a shack. But somehow these two guys meet, as they just become young adults, and they end up becoming America's first black and white comedy team. And the last, which is probably far more significant than being the first, that they were the last. But it's an American story. It really is. It's an American story that if you work hard, a lot of obstacles are going to come your way, and everything they could throw at us, they did. And we survived, and today we're living the American dream.
I mean, you folks, you grew up in such a poverty that I can't even imagine it. And then, to top it all off, the man you thought was your father wasn't, and the man you thought was your uncle was your father. It was what a family tree there.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things that happens probably in more families than you'll ever know. But I noticed that when I was growing up, I didn't look a lot like my brothers and sisters, and so my mom had an affair, and I was the result of that, But it was all of that is positive. I'm an optimist. I always believe that whatever happens for a reason. And the man that was my biological father was a man I already had emulated. I just thought I really thought the world of him. He owned a tavern in my neighborhood where I shined shoes in the bar, and he told jokes behind the bar. I used to emulate him, I used to tell the jokes that he told behind the bar, many that shouldn't be told on a Catholic school playground, but it turned out all, like I say, in life, if you believe that there's a destiny for you, that everything that happens for a rhyme and for a reason.
Yeah, well, that's true. And I always feel that people who have those kind of childhoods, they work much harder than someone who's given everything and catered to in terms of the final, viewpoint in life. A lot of the ones who had to work really hard when they're young, it pays off when they're older.
Well, you get that work ethic. You have core values that you learn when you were a child. Those core values, are with you the rest of your life. When the going gets tough, the tough get going is the old cliche, but that so happens in my life so many times when I was down. And as the book, talks about, when the comedy team split up, I ended up sleeping in an old abandoned car, a Nash Rambler, out in L.A. area, with a wife and 3 kids in Chicago. I was hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, begging to work for free at the Comedy Store, But all those stories are in the book. But it turns out that, that even that, I was able to survive because of the childhood that I had come from.
Right, because you adjusted and you did what you had to do to survive.
Yeah, and that's what we are. We're all survivors, and that's why the book is for everybody, for young, old, black, white. It's an American story, as I said, that that your dreams can come true. But it's like I say in the book. It's like God to me. Look, I'm going to put a load on you the first half of your life, but if you survive, the second half is on me, because the second half has just been the greatest.
Yeah, I thought that was very clever when you wrote that, because it does seem that way. I mean, after the Johnny Carson show, life changed. But before we get to that, again, your brother Glenn went to the service. You went to the service. You tried to do what you could to survive, and I found this book humorous. I mean, with all the stuff that you and Tim went through, the book has humor shining through it. And survival going through it. It's a really wonderful book. I got to tell people that even if you've never heard of Tim Reed or of Tom Dreesen, and that means you'd be living under a rock. But if you hadn't heard of them and you read this book, it's a wonderful book. And I can just picture you folks on stage at the Black Expo and all the different incidents that were recounted here when you and Tim were together. The only thing that would have made it a better ending in my estimation, but it wasn't true, so it couldn't be done. But it would have been nice if you and Tim actually made it as a comedy team at some point.
Yeah, I would have thought that would have been. Although in a lot of ways we did make it. In a lot of ways, we appeared in all black clubs all across America. We appeared in all white clubs. In a lot of ways we did. To this day, there are people that will come up and say, you made me laugh. See, we represented something in those days that people were fearful of. They saw a black guy and a white guy on stage talking about the issues of today and getting along. There was a discourse. Now, today, because Obama's running against McCain, and people are saying all over America, we need more discourse. We need more discourse. Well, Tim and I were doing that 35 years ago. If you if you didn't get involved with a black friend of yours or someone, if you didn't have questions, there are so many questions the black community has about the white community, and there's so many questions the white community has about the black community. But at work or workplaces, they rarely will get into a discourse. Well, Tim and I represented that for them. We'd be on a stage somewhere, and the moment we walked on stage, you'd hear a hush come over the audience because they'd go, uh-oh, what's this all about? But then they found that we were having fun on stage, talking about things that they were afraid to talk about
Right.
with their white friends or with their black friends,
When
So
Tim,
in a lot of ways, we did make it, And,
well, you guys made it individually, but I mean, as major stars together, you didn't do that.
no,
But
we didn't, and that was the disappointment in the book, and it was always been my disappointment,
yeah,
But again, I go back to that today a black and white comedy team could not survive, and I believe that because the political correct police would destroy them, And my example of that is that a year ago they asked Joe Biden what he thought of Barack Obama, and he said, "Oh, he's clean, he's articulate," and the whole world came down on him. All the networks started calling him a racist because he said that he was clean or articulate. What he meant was, in my era, and Joe Biden and I aren't that far from age, that if a person was clean, that meant they were sharp, they were a sharp dresser, that they were, and that was a street term, And it wasn't long afterward that when Obama won South Carolina, that they asked Bill Clinton about it, and Bill Clinton said, well, Jesse Jackson also won South Carolina, and all the networks deemed him as a racist. He was a racist. And one day he was America's first black president, and 24 hours later he was the head of the Ku Klux Klan.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just
how could you survive today, as a black-white comedy?
yeah, because if you're saying someone's articulate and they take that as an insult, that's kind of difficult to work in those parameters.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I remember reading the book, and at one point you were still struggling, and Tim was on WKRP in Cincinnati.
No, that's not true. Tim was when I did my first Tonight Show. Tim wasn't on WKRP. I actually broke through first.
Oh, okay, all right. Well,
and what happened was Tim was staying with a woman up in Bel Air, who's named in the book, and he was laying in bed. He had gotten kind of lax after the team broke up, and he admits in the book that he started smoking grass and doing a lot of things he should have been doing, and not taking care of the business that he wanted to. And then he was laying up in Bel Air one night, and he turned on the Tonight Show, and I was on the Tonight Show.
That's right.
And he saw it, and
Yep.
that woke him up.
You're right.
And he went the next day and started working on his craft, and it was about 2 years later he got on WKRP.
And he was living at the time with a big star.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And living the good life.
Yeah.
But missing something, and especially when he saw you, he said, there it is. That was the catalyst for him to get going again. That's right.
Yeah. He just decided that and Tim has all the work ethic. He's a hard-working guy. He just got laxed in that period in his life. But see, that's what the book is about. It's about all those things in all of our lives that you struggle, you dream, you believe, and then you fall back somehow. And there is no shortcut to success. It's hard work, and it's hard work not only to make it in show business, but it's hard work to stay in show business. Along with success comes the responsibility to remain successful. How do you do that? You have to keep reinventing yourself in our business. You have to keep working on your craft if you love it.
Yeah. People that are young that are out there listening that don't remember the Johnny Carson show really have no idea of the impact they had. It was before cable. There was a few channels out there, And when you were on that show, if you did well and he said, hey, come over here and sit down next to me, your career was made. Tell us a little bit about you when you first went out there. I know that you talk about it in the book and people can read about it, but tell us a little bit about what it was like that first time walking out there and the great response you had and how that changed your whole life around.
Well, what you have to know, go back to that era. In 1975, wherever you went in America, if somebody said to you, what do you do for a living? You say, well, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh, yeah? You ever been on Johnny Carson? Because if you hadn't been on Johnny Carson, in the eyes of America, you just weren't a stand-up comedian. In those days, he was the stamp of approval. With all the other shows out there, he was the one you had to get. So when you finally got to that show, all of us comedians geared ourselves for that moment. That was the moment that we had to seize. If you seize that moment, you were on your way. Because one appearance on The Tonight Show, Freddie Prinze got a sitcom the following day. One appearance could change your career. So in order to get on The Tonight Show, you had to work clean, so you had to come up with that kind of material that would impress them. Well, finally, after, struggling for a long time, and I kept pestering The Tonight Show to come and see me, a man named Craig Tennis, who I'll always be grateful to, he came to see me, and I got the job. So he said, you're on The Tonight Show next Tuesday. Well, I came ready, prepared, and I got bumped. And I came the next week, and they ran out of time again, and I got bumped. And I came the next week, and they ran out of time again, and I got bumped. So, and finally I came the fourth time, and Fred DeCordova came into the makeup room, and he said to me, I got bad news for you. And I said, what? He said, you're on tonight. So I knew that this was that moment. And there's no describing. They come and get you out of the green room, and they take you that long walk behind that big curtain, and you're standing behind the curtain, and Doc Severinsen's orchestra's playing because they're in commercial break, and you're pacing, and the talent coordinator said, you all right? And you say, yeah, I'm fine. He said, all right. He leaves you alone, and now you're pacing, and all of a sudden the music stops because they're out of commercial, and we're coming on live now, and your heart stops because out there are 15 million people going to be watching this show. Every agent, manager, bookers, people that could change your career are going to be watching this show. Not only that, your mother has everybody from the old neighborhood watching it back home, so if you bomb here tonight, you can't even go back home, and you hear Johnny introducing you, and you're going, oh, my God, I forgot my first line. What am I? And all of a sudden, they open that curtain, and you walk out, and it's like you're in a operating room, all the bright lights, and you look for your spot on the floor. They got a little T marked on the floor. And you walk out, and you hit that spot, and the audience is applauding, and all of a sudden, the audience stops, and you're on to your first joke. And you get through that first joke, and they get to laugh, and then another gets to laugh, and all of a sudden, you're on a roll, and then it's the greatest feeling in the world. You hear Johnny laughing behind you, and you know that it's going good, And then finally that last laugh, and the people are applauding and cheering, and you look at Johnny, and he gives you the little circle single that he would put his finger up in a circle saying you scored. And I walked back through the curtain, and Johnny called me out for a second bow. I went back out for the second bow, and they kept cheering. And when I went back through the curtain, everybody backstage was pounding me on the back and applauding and stage hands, and my whole life changed from that point on. The following day, CBS signed me to a development deal. I mean, offers coming in from everywhere, and I've never stopped working since.
It's a great story, and it's really a wonderful book as well. I enjoyed the entire book. I read it in a couple of days, and tell us a little bit about you and Tim Reed when you were partners for a while. Then there was it seemed like a little bit of a fallout. How you guys touring at this point together? Are you doing anything together for the book, or?
Oh yeah, we're both together right now, and we're starting Monday on an 8-city tour, and Tim is we're the best of friends. We always have been. I've always stayed in touch with Tim and him, me, his family, his children call me Uncle Tom. So I always tell them, if there's going to be an Uncle Tom in your family, let it be me. And so we're the best of friends, and we're going on the road. We're doing David Letterman's show on September 23rd, and David wrote a review of the book. He was the first one to read the book. He read the manuscript, and he called us, like you. He read it in 2 days. He called us and said, how much he enjoyed it, and so he wrote the review for the book. And I love Tim. Everything I have, everything I own came because I met this man. You got to remember how we met. Tim had graduated from Norfolk State College in Norfolk, Virginia, and E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago as a marketing representative. And I was living in Chicago in a civic group called the JCs. I was living in a suburb on the south side called Harvey. And Tim joined the JCs, the Harvey JCs, with me, and we together worked on a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor. And it became such a success that one day a little 8th grade girl said, "You guys are so funny, you ought to become a comedy team." And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us both. So we did it, and we went out and paid all those dues that you read out in the book. The book has got fascinating stories. You know, when we were doing the book, Mark, when we were doing the book, Tim and I, with Ron Rappaport, who wrote the narrative of the book, when we were doing the book, there were times we were laughing so hard that tears were running down our faces while we were reminiscing. And there were other times we weren't laughing at all, and tears were running down our faces. That's what the book is. It's a roller coaster ride, but it's a survival of two guys, and they're best of friends today.
It's interesting when when you read the parts about when you folks were doing the comedy together and going on the road. There were times where it seemed like you were right on the precipice of success, and something would happen and kind of kill it.
Yeah, it seemed like it wasn't. It just seemed like every time we got near it, real close to it, something else would happen. See, again, you have to understand the turmoil in America at that time. You know, in 1969, when Tim Reed and I started, I had just gotten out of the service. The Vietnam War was raging. Students were protesting all over America. The African Americans were rioting in cities because they felt disenfranchised from our system. And here it was a young black guy and a young white guy on stages trying to make people laugh, you know, in the middle of all that, you know. So there was a lot of tension going on in America. So, you know, there were times we thought we were right there, and we were gonna break through, and then it wouldn't happen, you know. And I would still, to be honest with you, I would have never broken up the team. Tim wanted to break it up more than anything. He just felt like he had enough, and he really wanted to be more of an actor, you know. And he became, as he is, a fine actor.
And he's had some success.
Yes.
Yes. It's very interesting, you know, when we marketed the fact that you and Tim were coming on the PMP network, and we get a lot of emails, and many of the emailers that heard your name, they remember two things right off the bat: the Johnny Carson show and Frank Sinatra. Tell us a little bit about how you got hooked up with Frank in '82, and I know you toured with him for 14 years.
Yeah, I was his opening act for 14 years. Like a lot of times people say I opened for Frank Sinatra. I like to say that Frank closed for me. But then again, Frank always loved that joke. I would tell that joke, and he always loved that. But yeah, it was one of the highlights of my life. As a little boy, growing up in Harvey, Illinois, I shined shoes in taverns throughout my neighborhood. There were 8 taverns in my neighborhood, and I shined shoes in all of them. Sinatra was on every jukebox singing. You know, and years later, you know, I would hear Frank singing "Come Fly With Me," and years later I was flying with him in his private jet all over America. It was just a thrill of mine. I was a fan of his when I was a kid, and we became friends, and I stayed at his home 6-8 times a year. You know, I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral. I actually wrote a play, a one-man play called Shining Shoes and Sinatra. It opens with me shining shoes in a bar, as I did as a little boy, and Sinatra's on the jukebox, and it ends with me carrying his coffin, as I did. And it's the journey from that little boy. You know, so I do the one-man play around the country every now and then. But he was a joy to travel with. He was a joy to know. He was an interesting, complex individual. One of the most benevolent human beings I ever met in my life, who did more for mankind than people will ever know, you know. And he also was a brilliant, brilliant performer.
Yeah, even when he was really ill toward the end, I remember in one of the sections of the book you talked about how he had a real difficult time with a song and then came right back with another one like nothing had been wrong.
It's one of the most moving things I've ever seen in show business. We're at the Mark Auditorium in the Quad Cities, and in you know, Betancourt, Iowa, Moline, Illinois, Quincy, and it was about 15,000 people. And he was 78 years old at the time, and he started to forget lyrics to songs and things like that. And we noticed, and all the staff, and we always thinking, well, when's it going to end? Whenever he wants it to end, it's his journey. And one night he had gone out. I performed. It was a great crowd, and I was standing in the wings of this big arena, and Frank went out and he sang 3 songs, and he was singing along real good. And then in the 4th song, he totally blanked on the lyrics. He totally forgot where the lyrics were. And the orchestra in the pit did not know this, and they kept playing, but Frank was whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry." And he's whispering in the microphone, and pretty soon the orchestra, realizing this, they began to shut their instruments down one at a time to almost, there was an eerie silence in the arena, and Frank was still whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." And I moved to stage left. I figured, this is it, this is it. it's over. The tour is over, and it's time to take him home. And just then, a guy way up in the audience just shouted as loud as he could. He stood up and he yelled, "That's all right, Frank. It's all right. We love you, Frank. We love you." And he started to applaud. And then the guy next to him started applauding. And then the couple next to him, and pretty soon there was 100 people applauding, and then 200, then 1,000, then 2,000, and finally 15,000 people were cheering in the arena, applauding him. Now he turned away from them and he walked with the microphone toward the stage left where I was at, and I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to say, "Let's go home, Mr. S. It's been a great career. It's time to go home." And he had tears in his eyes, but he looked at me and he turned around and went back to center stage, and he quieted the audience down, and he went into the next song, which was Mac the Knife, and he absolutely drilled the song. And the audience then would not stop cheering. They kept cheering and cheering, and finally when he quieted them down, he was ready to go into the next number, and he looked up at the guy way up in the audience, and he pointed at him. He said, "I love you too, pal." And he went on to sing for 2 years after that. It was one of the most dramatic things I've ever seen on stage. It's all in the book.
Yeah, the book has all these stories and much more. The University of Chicago Press is who puts the book out. It's called Tim and Tom, an American comedy in black and white, and it's a really very entertaining book and also an inspirational book for people out there to read. I guess one of the questions we talked about Johnny Carson, and I miss him and his show terribly. Jay Leno, I kind of got to like after a while, and he's going to be leaving. I'm not really a big Conan O'Brien fan. What do you think about the future of late night?
Well, I think it's so widespread, that I don't know. To see television used to be very small. You had ABC, NBC, and CBS. Today, people pick up a remote and they can go to 500 stations. So there is no one show that can survive. And also I just, it used to be the family would huddle up on the couch, and because you had to get up and go forward and change the station, they would leave that station on for the night.
Mm-hmm.
Today, you've got a TV in 4 rooms, and each kid is watching a different TV, and the teenagers are on the internet, and so I think that it's kind of watered down, what I feel sad about it is there isn't a show that can launch a comedian. In my opinion, that Jay Leno has never launched one comedian, and Johnny Carson, I could name 60 that Johnny launched,
mm-hmm.
me being one of them. And Jay's show and David's show, David Letterman's show, launched a comedian named Jay Leno. David's late night show was the one that launched Jay.
Right, that's right.
So it would be hard for comedians to make it today, and there aren't the venues to work today for comedians. I'm getting off the subject of Late Show, but and I didn't mean it, but
that's okay.
I think that now people have their own late night talk show in their basement. A guy broadcasts from his basement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different ballgame. Although Jay and David are my buddies, we started out together, and I'm proud of both of those guys. They have done so well. And David, of course, and I are real close. We hang out together. And David let me host the show when he had the shingles. I was a guest host, and I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Do you are you doing a lot of TV aside from I know you got Letterman coming up? Anything else planned that we can see?
Well, first of all, there's 2 things you can do. You can go to TomDreesen.com. It's DREESEN, TomDreesen.com. Or you can go to TimandTomComedy.com to find out where Tim and I are going on the tour. We're going all over all over America on the tour, doing a lot of television and stuff. But there's some offers in. I've got a couple of shows that they want me to do. One is a poker show with all my celebrity friends. I play golf on a tour called the Celebrity Players Tour. It's basketball, baseball, football, hockey, tennis, and show business people that are 10 handicap or below. So it's people like Johnny Bench, Mike Schmidt, Mario Lemieux, John Elway, Dan Marino, Michael Jordan, Charles. There's a lot of Charles Barkley's not a 10 handicap or below. We exempt some celebrities. But while we play golf all over the country, afterward those guys get together and they play poker and they play cards. And what they do in that locker room is hysterical. So we're trying to recreate that on television. Some partners of mine, and we're going to, I may host that show that's coming up. And I've got some offers. But to be honest with you, Mark, I'm having the time of my life. I perform all over America for corporate America. I still work Vegas every now and then. I work when I want to work, and I also play golf in some of the finest courses in the land. I'm the master of ceremonies for the Bob Hope Classic every year. I'm the master of ceremonies for Eastwood for the AT&T Pebble Beach every year, and for the Frank Sinatra Golf Tournament. Plus, Tiger Woods uses me a couple times to help his foundation out. Arnold Palmer down in Bay Hill hires me once in a while to come down and do some shows. So I have a great life.
Is it true that you taught Tiger everything he knows about golf?
Well, you know, he comes to me all the time, and you know, you play golf with Tiger Woods, you realize that you're not a golfer. He's a fascinating human being. I once interviewed him on a stage, and I said to him, Tiger, what book did you read? Not golf book. What book did you read that profoundly changed your life? And he said, E equals MC square. And I said, E equals MC square. He said, yes, have you ever read it? I said, I'm still trying to figure out who MC Hammer is. But that's how brilliant he is. He could have gone to Stanford on an academic scholarship.
Yeah.
You know, he's a fascinating human and a totally committed and focused human being. He's mentally as tough as anybody I've ever met. And I was in the service for 4 years, and I served in a pretty tough outfit called NEGDF. But he's one of the toughest human beings I've ever met mentally. That's why he's head and shoulders above everybody. You know, he changed his golf swing 3 times, and all the experts kept saying he shouldn't do that. But what they forget is he's an expert. He's more of an expert than they are.
Right, and I think you mentioned he's just focused. That's the key to any success, is focusing and putting all your energies into it.
That's exactly what, if you read our book is that much of a motivation. That's the way I've been for years, because I read, when I was a kid growing up, I had every reason to become a bum, an alcoholic, or in jail. You know, any psychiatrist who would have read my childhood story, they'd say, if I ended up in prison, they'd say, well, you see, the reason you end up in prison is because of this childhood, and I say that's BS. You know, I say that's all BS, you know, that you can take any lemon that you get and turn it into a lemonade. I read every book I could read by successful people. I read all the positive thinking books, you know, from Norman Vincent Peale, you know, to the modern day Wayne Dyers. You know, I read everything I get my hands on. My favorite book was The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. It literally changed my life. You know, and that I believe that, you know, you can get focused. You know, today I'm doing, all my dreams have come true. I'm doing everything that I dreamed that I would do. I make a living as a stand-up comedian, and that's all I ever really wanted to do. And I'm the happiest guy in the world. And I believe that you know, that if you get focused, and you know, and put all the negatives, you know, you can aside for a moment and get focused on what you want in life, you can become all you want, especially in this great country called America.
Well, I'll let that be the final words from Tom Dreesen. The book is called Tim and Tom, An American Comedy in Black and White, again from the University of Chicago. Go buy it. It's a fascinating book, and I give it 5 stars. That's my highest rating. Tom, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Mark, thank you, and tell all the people that listen to you that timandtomcomedy.com, you'll find out where we are.
Okay.
Or tomdreesen.com. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
The interview.
Bye-bye.